Welcome to Reddit Relationships. Now let's get into this Reddit video. This Reddit story is called Found Out. My wife of 21 years was cheating while she was visiting her parents. Hey Reddit, I am here to share my story that happened just last year. My wife and I were married for 21 years, 2 kids, both in college. Now I would say our marriage was good. Never had any trust issues or anything of that nature. About a month ago, my wife went to see her parents that she hasn't seen in about 2 months because of her career and working a lot. She was with her parents for about 2 weeks. I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary because we would always communicate at about the same time every day, either through text or a phone call. The last week or so, I noticed she wasn't answering her calls or text messages in a timely manner. I wasn't worried. I just figured she was doing things with her parents, so I didn't put any more thought into it. My daughter, who is in college, called me one day and asked where her mother was. I said she was visiting your grandparents. What my daughter told me next made me a little concerned. She said, "Dad, I wasn't going to say anything, but Mom was talking to some guy who lives a few minutes away." I said, "Really?" I said, "How do you know it was some guy?" She said one day when she was visiting us, she said her mother stopped at a gas station and left her phone in the car while her mother was in the store. Her phone rang and the caller ID said, "My hot new friend." My daughter said, "Please don't say anything to Mom." I said I won't. After my daughter said that, I didn't want to think anything crazy or blow up her phone. Instead, I waited for her to get back. When my wife got back from visiting her parents, she acted like everything was normal. Didn't act distant at all, just her normal self. One day after work, I drove home and I pull up in the driveway. I notice my wife's car in the driveway. So I walk in the door. I don't see her right away. I walk to the bedroom and I still don't see her. As I began to walk away from the bedroom, I hear a noise in the bathroom. I turn back around. She doesn't know I am home. I peek into the bathroom. She is taking naked selfies. I say, "What the hell are you doing?" She screams. I asked her again, "What are you doing?" She then tells me she is taking photos for a magazine. I say to her, "You are lying." I then lied to her that I know you are seeing someone that stays in the same town as your parents. She doesn't say a word. I walk out of the bedroom and go into the dining room. She comes behind me, naked and all, and starts apologizing. I told her, "You know how I found out you were possibly cheating on me?" Our daughter told me, she told me not to say anything. But after seeing you take pictures, I asked her, "How long have you been cheating on me?" She looks at me and to my surprise she says, "It doesn't matter." Right then and there I told her to pack her shit and get out. She says, "I am not going anywhere. I have as much right to this house as you do." I say, "Okay, we will do this your way. What I will do is let everyone know that you are cheating on me. And those photos you took, they are in the cloud. Oh, you didn't know as you take them, they are uploaded to the cloud. And I will share them with your family and my family and your friends and my friends. You can't delete them because I set up an authentication process to get in. And only I have access to that." She says, "You wouldn't dare. If you don't get out, I will." She says, "Where will I go?" I said, "That's not my problem, but you have 2 places, your parents or your boyfriend." So she walks off, grabs 2 big suitcases and starts packing some things. Meanwhile, I send a text to both of my kids, telling them I will call them later. I call my brother and let him know that his sister-in-law was cheating on me with a guy that resides near her parents. He said, "How did you find out?" I told him Megan, our daughter, told me. I said, "She noticed a phone call with the caller ID on her mother's phone saying my hot new friend." He says, "My goodness, what are you going to do?" I said, "I am going to file for divorce." He says, "You don't want to find out why?" I said, "No, I caught her taking naked selfies in the bathroom." He says, "No way, she didn't do that." I said, "Yes, she did." I also told him I don't want to reconcile or do marriage counseling because she visits her parents often and could be seeing him on a regular basis. When she goes to see them, after getting off the phone with him, I called around to a few lawyers and scheduled an appointment to go and file for divorce. Later that evening, I get a phone call from my wife. She wants to talk. I told her, "There is nothing you can say. Our daughter told me that you were talking to someone. That's horrible. You would let her see that." She says, "I didn't mean for that to happen." I told her, "I see why you wanted to visit your parents and you did it often. And the photos, it all makes sense. Now, I told her the only thing we need to do is sell the house so we can split the equity in it. That's all I want. I don't want to stay married to you." She starts crying a little. I told her, "Your tears are not going to make me change my mind." I gave you 21 years of my life. I fought for you. I watched after you financially, gave you 2 healthy kids. You didn't want or need anything. If you did, I was there to give it to you, even help you pay down some of your student loan debt. And this is how you repay this family. I also told her I don't even know why I am talking to you. I also told her that Megan kind of already know you might be cheating and I will leave it up to her to tell her brother. She goes on apologizing and asks for some time to get more of her things. I interrupted and told her you need to tell your parents why you are staying there. I will give you 1 week to do so. After that conversation, I go to my lawyers and file for divorce based on irreconcilable differences. She is not asking for any spousal support because she makes more than I do. I don't want her money. I just don't want her as my wife anymore. The fact that my daughter told me she was talking to some guy and she was taking naked selfies, that's all I need to see. I don't need to spend money on a private investigator. The signs are there. After that conversation, my son calls me and says, "What the hell is going on with mom?" I asked him what he means. He says his sister told him that mom was talking to some other man. I confirmed it and told him that his mother was indeed cheating. I told him I asked her to leave and she has. My son then asks, "Dad, why did she cheat?" I said, "Son, I don't know." He says, "Will we have a home to come to when we visit?" I said, "Yes, you will. I am not going anywhere." That almost made me cry listening to my son ask that question. A couple of days go by and my mother-in-law calls me and tells me she is so sorry for what has transpired. She asked, is there anything my wife can do to maybe change my mind? I said, "Mom, there is nothing she can do. She ruined the family and betrayed not only me, but the kids as well. And they already know." My mother-in-law says she is taking it hard and just cries most of the day. I told her she will be okay. That guy she is cheating with stays near you. So, I have been told when we finish chatting I decided to do some more digging. I get a hold of phone records and the number that my daughter saw on the caller ID. She has been calling or texting for at least a year. So, she has been cheating on me. I am assuming for at least a year, probably longer. My attorney has informed me that the paperwork has been filed for the divorce, and I am just waiting for her to be served. A couple of weeks go by. Both my son and daughter come home for the weekend from college. They both attended the same university. We all sit down one evening and I told my kids, don't hate your mother. In fact, I encourage you guys to go see her. She is staying with her parents. I told them I am not going to force you to see her, but maybe go visit her for a few hours to see how she is doing. Both of my kids say they are not doing that. They are not ready. They are not ready to forgive her yet. They asked me what I plan to do. I told them once the divorce is final, enjoy my life and have fun. Not going to jump into seeing other women or dating. I am still heartbroken over the fact that your mother chose to betray us. My kids go back to the university. Later that day, I get a phone call from a strange number that I didn't know. I answered the phone. Turns out it was the guy she was cheating with. I was shocked. I asked him how he got my number. He wouldn't tell me. He goes on to apologize profusely for sleeping with my wife. I said, "Wait, you slept with her?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I did not know she was married. She never wore her wedding ring around me. She would be here visiting her parents and pretended to work out of state." I then asked him what made him call me. He said he just had a hunch that something wasn't right. So one day when they were together, he wrote down her license plate number. It came back with an address that wasn't in this county. So he started digging. He found out that she lived here and worked here in this county. He is a retired private investigator. He says, in that line of work, when you get a hunch, you usually start digging. He then told me that he broke it off with her and told her that he didn't want to see her anymore. He confesses that his wife cheated on him and left him for someone else. They were married for 31 years. He said it was the worst thing he has ever felt, and he couldn't participate in it anymore. Once he found out she was married, I thanked him for the call. Before he got off the phone, he apologized again. After that, I felt some sort of vindication. She lost her affair partner and family in less than a month after I found out. Since then, she has been served with the divorce hearing. We go to court and I now am a free man. The judge says we need to sell the house to split the equity. When she came to court, that was her focus. She wanted some type of financial gain from the divorce. At least it seemed that way. After the divorce, she has remained with her parents until she can find her place. She has been to the house to get odds and ends on occasion, The kids still haven't gone to see her, and I don't know when they will visit their mother. I am sorry this is rather long, but I had to write this somewhere. It was kind of therapeutic. Thank you, Reddit, for listening. Thank you for taking the time to watch and listen to this Reddit. Okay, let's get real for a second. You know how they say life's what happens when you're busy making other plans? Well, mine decided to implode while I was busy scrolling through old Paris pics, trying to remember why Michael and I were the perfect couple. Our 5th anniversary was a quiet affair. Just us, a homemade dinner, and the ghosts of a honeymoon spent in Paris. Romantic, right? Except that spark, that insane connection we had? It felt like it was fading into a routine so comfortable, it was almost suffocating. Michael with his head buried in spreadsheets, and me grading papers until my eyes blurred. Movies became our conversation, silence our soundtrack. But here's where it gets juicy. Enter David, the new gym instructor with a smile that could light up a black hole, and an interest in my day that seemed revolutionary after months of, "How was work?" Met with grunts from Michael. "Can you blame me for craving a bit more excitement?" David was like a live wire, electrifying my dull days with just a glance. So yeah, I fell hard and fast into something that felt a lot like recklessness wrapped in desire. It started with coffees after my workout, just as friends. But who were we kidding? Each laugh, each shared secret, pulled me further away from my husband and deeper into David's orbit. I told myself it was just a bit of fun, a harmless distraction from the monotony. But as we crossed that line, the one I promised myself I'd never even approach, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to crash and burn. Yet I couldn't stop. Michael became a shadow and David my sun. And that's where it all began, folks. My descent into a world of lies, lust, and eventually loss. Buckle up, because trust me, this ride's just getting started. Picture this, it's another mundane Tuesday, or it was supposed to be until my world started spinning on its axis, and not in the fun, dizzy on a playground kind of way. There I was, sprawled on the couch, half watching some forgettable show, when Michael decides to play detective with my phone. And boom, just like that, he finds a text from David. "Who's David?" he asks, voice colder than our freezer. "Oh, just a new friend from the gym," I reply, my heart racing like I've just run a marathon. Michael buys it, but the look in his eyes tells me this is far from over. And let me tell you, juggling a husband and a lover? It's like riding a roller coaster with no safety harness. Every stolen moment with David sends adrenaline pumping through my veins, but it's paired with a gnawing guilt that eats at me during the quiet nights. It's exhilarating and exhausting, and I can't seem to stop. But then Michael's suspicions start to bubble up like a pot left too long on the stove. He questions my late gym sessions, the unexplained absences, the smell of cologne that definitely isn't his. And one evening he finally explodes, confronting me with accusations I can't entirely dodge. I lie through my teeth, denying everything. But the trust between us cracks, spider webbing out into something ugly. The climax? Michael stumbles upon an email from David that I thought I'd deleted. It's like watching a car crash in slow motion. You want to look away, but you just can't. My heart sinks as he reads it, each word a nail in the coffin of our marriage. I deny it, again, desperation making my voice shake. But the damage is done. Michael packs a bag and leaves to stay with his brother, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a suffocating blanket of regret. That night, the house feels emptier than it ever has, and I'm left wondering how I let things get this far. The thrill of the affair has vanished, replaced by a deep, aching void. I'm conflicted, torn between the life I've built with Michael and the reckless abandon David represents. It's a mess, a complicated web of lies and emotions, and for the first time, I'm not sure if I can or even want to untangle it. The moment Michael walked out, it was like the universe handed me a get-out-of-jail-free card. No more sneaking around, no more lies. Just me, David, and the thrill of the forbidden. It felt like freedom, like I was finally breathing after being underwater for so long. But here's the thing about playing with fire, you're bound to get burned. It hit me out of nowhere, the gut punch that changed everything. There I was, thinking I'm living some sort of dream, when I overhear David. He wasn't just talking. He was boasting, bragging to his buddy about how he'd scored the unhappy housewife. My heart didn't just break, it shattered. All the lies I told myself about David caring for me, about us having something real, evaporated in an instant. I was just another notch on his belt, a game to be won. Confronting David was like ripping off a band-aid. Quick, painful, and necessary. I ended it right there with a few choice words and a storm of tears waiting to be unleashed the moment I was alone. And boy did they come. I was a mess, a mix of anger, betrayal, and the dawning realization of the colossal mistake I'd made. So, I did what any desperate, heartbroken person would do. I tried to go back. Back to Michael, back to the life I'd so recklessly thrown away. I poured my heart out, told him everything. The affair, the breakup, the crushing realization of my own foolishness. I begged for forgiveness, for a second chance. But Michael, oh Michael. He looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since this whole mess started. And what did he see? A stranger. He filed for divorce, and just like that, the final door slammed shut on what we once had. You'd think that was rock bottom, right? But no. The universe had one more twist in store. David, the cause of all this chaos, moved on to his next conquest. My sister Emily. The betrayal sliced through the already gaping wound in my heart. It wasn't just my marriage that was destroyed. My family was fracturing too. Desperation doesn't even begin to cover what I felt. It was a mix of horror, disbelief, and a profound soul-crushing regret. I'd lost Michael, I'd lost myself, and now it seemed I was losing my sister too. All because of choices I made. Because of a path I chose to walk down. And as I stood there watching my world continue to crumble, I couldn't help but wonder, was any of it worth it? The answer, as much as it pained me to admit, was a resounding no. The moment I realized David had moved on to Emily, my sister, it felt like I was living in some twisted soap opera. Except in those shows you can switch off the TV. Me? I was stuck in the nightmare, no remote in sight. Emily, bless her heart, was clueless about the storm she'd just walked into. David, the guy who'd left my life in shambles, was now wooing my sister with the same charm that had fooled me. The rift it caused between us? Grand Canyon-sized. Isolated doesn't even begin to cover how I felt. It was like I'd been exiled not just from my family, but from everyone I cared about. Friends who were once mutual with Michael picked sides, and spoiler alert, no one picked Team Anna. It was a loneliness I'd never known. And it forced me to look in the mirror for the first time in a long while. And let me tell you, I didn't like what I saw. Amidst this, the divorce papers came. Michael was as cold and distant as a distant star. And who could blame him? Every meeting, every signature, was a reminder of the mess I'd made. It was official, I was losing everything I'd once held dear. But life has a funny way of kicking you when you're down, because that's when Emily found out. Found out about me and David. About the lies and the affair. The betrayal she felt was palpable, and watching her break off with David brought me no joy. Just a profound sadness for the chaos I'd caused. David. He left town shortly after, his trail of destruction complete. The road to rebuilding was more like climbing a mountain with no summit in sight. Trying to mend things with Emily was my first step, but she was resistant, understandably. Each attempt to reach out was met with coldness, a mirror of the distance I'd felt with Michael. But I was determined, or maybe just stubborn, because if there's one thing I've learned from this whole disaster, it's that some bridges, no matter how charred, are worth trying to rebuild. So here I am, taking it one day at a time, learning to live with the consequences of my choices. It's not easy, and I doubt it ever will be, but if there's a chance to fix even a fraction of the hurt I've caused, you better believe I'm going to take it. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about making amends, it's about finding a way to forgive myself. And maybe, just maybe, finding a way back to the people I love. The whispers started the moment I stepped back into the real world. A world I'd almost forgotten existed outside the bubble of my own drama. Walking into work, it felt like I was wearing a scarlet letter. Each glance and hushed conversation a reminder of the scandal I'd become. There she goes, they'd whisper, as if I couldn't hear them, as if I wasn't already drowning in my own pool of regret. It was like being back in high school, only worse, because this time I knew I deserved it. And let's not even start on the financial mess. The divorce settlement? It hit me like a freight train, leading me to pick up the pieces of my shattered lifestyle. Suddenly, I'm juggling bills I can't pay and a lifestyle I can't afford, all on a teacher's salary. Nights out, designer clothes, those became relics of a past life, replaced by budget spreadsheets that never seemed to add up. Loneliness became my constant companion, a shadow that followed me even into crowded rooms. It's one thing to be alone, it's another to feel alone in a room full of people. My bed felt too big, my home too quiet, and my thoughts too loud. Every what if and if only played on loop in my mind, a cruel soundtrack to my newfound solitude. That's when I realized I couldn't do it alone. Therapy wasn't just an option. It was a lifeline. Sitting on that couch every Thursday at 4 p.m., I started to untangle the web of guilt, shame, and regret I'd woven around myself. It was hard, probably the hardest thing I've ever done. But week by week, I started to see glimmers of the person I used to be, the person I could be again. Armed with a fragile new sense of self-worth, I began to venture out again, attending social events solo. It was awkward at first, showing up alone, feeling out of place in time. But slowly I started to make connections. Real ones, built on shared interests and genuine conversations, rather than the superficial ties of my previous life. Work, though, remained a battleground. My professional reputation had taken a hit, and no amount of late nights or early mornings seemed to make a difference. I was the woman who had it all and threw it away. A cautionary tale in flesh and blood. But every challenge, every whispered judgment, became a stepping stone. I was determined to prove them wrong, to prove to myself that I wasn't just the sum of my mistakes. So here I am, fighting my way back inch by painstaking inch. It's not easy, and some days it feels like I'm barely holding on. But for the first time in a long time, I have something I thought I'd lost forever: hope. Hope for a future that's different from my past. Hope for a chance to rewrite my story. And maybe, just maybe, that's all I need. The day I sat down to write that letter to Michael, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. It was more than just a letter, it was a confession, an apology, and a goodbye all rolled into one. I poured everything into it, every shred of guilt, every apology I had in me. Dropping it in the mailbox felt like letting go of a balloon, watching it drift away, knowing you can't get it back. And when he never responded, it was the silence that said everything. It was time to move on, truly move on. So, I threw myself into self-improvement like a woman possessed. Yoga, painting, a night class in creative writing, you name it, I tried it. It wasn't just about filling the hours, it was about rebuilding myself from the ground up, piece by piece. Each new hobby was a step away from the person I'd been, and a step toward the person I wanted to be. The road to reconciliation with Emily was long and fraught with awkward starts and painful stops. But the day she finally forgave me, it felt like the sun breaking through the clouds after a storm. Her forgiveness wasn't given lightly, and I didn't accept it lightly. It was a promise, a vow to do better, be better. And then, just when I thought I was content being on my own, he walked into my life. Someone new, someone unexpected. He was kind, funny, and had a gentleness about him that made me feel safe. But the scars of my past made me cautious, hesitant to jump into anything too quickly. I was learning to trust again, but more importantly, I was learning to trust myself. Community service became my way of giving back. A chance to make amends in a small way. Whether it was serving meals at the homeless shelter or organizing charity events, each act of service was a step toward redemption. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about building a future. Rebuilding trust, especially with the people who'd seen me at my worst, was a painstaking process. There were no shortcuts, no easy fixes. But every day I showed up. I showed up for my family, for my friends, and most of all for myself. It was a slow journey, filled with small victories and setbacks. But with each step forward, I was proving to them, and to me, that people can change, that we're not defined by our lowest moments. Looking back, I realize how far I've come. From the ashes of my old life, I've built something new, something better. It's not perfect, and I'm not perfect. But maybe, just maybe, that's okay. The day I landed in the hospital, clutching my chest, thinking it was the end, was the day my life flashed before my eyes. Not the highlight reel, but the bloopers, the mistakes, the heartaches, the time lost. Lying in that sterile bed, hooked up to a symphony of beeps and drips, the reality hit me like a freight train. The stress of my past, the wreckage I'd caused, it wasn't just emotional. It was physical too. It was a wake-up call, loud and clear. Something had to change. The path to healing was slow, paved with doctor's visits and a newfound respect for my health. But it wasn't just my body that needed mending. My family ties were frayed, hanging by a thread. So, when we finally sat down for a family reunion, it was with cautious optimism. We tiptoed around the elephant in the room until we couldn't anymore. Acknowledging the past, we decided to look to the future. A future where we could be a family again, scars and all. But just as one part of my life seemed to be piecing back together, another was fraying. My new relationship, once a beacon of hope, was now clouded with doubts. My partner struggled with the shadows of my past, the whispers of mistrust. It was a different kind of heartache, one that made me question if I was doomed to repeat the same mistakes. Amidst the turmoil, a quiet realization blossomed within me: self-acceptance. It wasn't about erasing my past or ignoring my flaws. It was about acknowledging them, owning them, and recognizing that I was still worthy of love, happiness, and a second chance. This newfound acceptance became my armor, my strength. Financially, the road to recovery was littered with obstacles, but I tackled them head on. Budgeting, saving, even picking up extra shifts. Whatever it took to regain control. With each paid bill, each small financial victory, I felt a little more like the captain of my ship, steering away from the storm. Reconnecting with old friends was a gamble. I reached out, half expecting to be met with silence or disdain. But to my surprise, some doors opened. Conversations were had, coffees were shared, and slowly, the bridges I thought I'd burned started to show signs of repair. It wasn't universal forgiveness, but it was a start. Professionally, I hit a milestone. A project I'd poured my heart and soul into was recognized, celebrated even. It was a vindication, a public declaration that I was more than my personal failures. I was competent, capable, and deserving of respect. This journey of personal growth was often painful. A series of steps forward and inevitable slides back. But with each challenge, I found a resilience I didn't know I had. I wasn't the same person who had made those mistakes. I was someone new, someone better. The recognition I received for my community service was a bittersweet reminder of why I started in the first place. To make amends, to give back, to find redemption. It wasn't about the accolades. It was about the difference I was making, one small act at a time. As my new relationship weathered its storms, it emerged stronger, more resilient. My partner began to see the woman I'd become, not just the woman I'd been. We built a foundation of trust, understanding, and acceptance, proving that love could flourish even in the rockiest of soils. Looking forward, I'm filled with a cautious optimism. The past will always be a part of me, but it doesn't define me. I've learned, I've grown, and I've changed. The future is unwritten, a blank page waiting for new stories, new memories, and new beginnings. And for the first time in a long time, I'm excited. My wife and I owned a bakery for 5 years. It was okay for me, but it was mostly her deal. She found her passion in baking, and I was her willing assistant. My passion, however, was in voice acting and impersonations. I was just starting to make some money on the side by utilizing my skill, so I usually didn't want to be at the bakery. My wife was growing annoyed with me because I didn't share her passion. I didn't think it would drive a wedge between us, but it did. One day, I was helping my wife at the bakery when a returning customer stopped by. I knew him AP for years, but when he came in this time, he looked disappointed that I was the one approaching the counter. He appeared to consider leaving the bakery altogether, which I thought was weird. I took his order for his daughter's birthday cake, and he kept glancing into the back. He asked how my wife was doing. After he left, I told my wife he was in and placed an order. She looked at me with interest, then looked away, bummed. Her hands were covered in dough, while she told me she enjoys being the one to interact with customers because she has pride in our business. I just said something like, because I wanted to go home and record voices. Another day, when her cell phone buzzed on the counter out front, her hands were messy again. So I went to glance at it to see if it was important or business related. She looked worried as I walked by. When I looked at it, I realized why. It was a text from the aforementioned married father that ordered his daughter's birthday cake. As my wife prepared the cake, he texted her, asking if she was free to come over again that night at 7, since his wife and kids wouldn't be home. My jaw dropped as I stared at it. Another text came through that said he missed her body. I entered the passcode to my wife's phone for the first time in a year. Thankfully, she hadn't changed it. As I scrolled up, my eyes scanned over a plethora of naughty sexting, nudes, and affair messages. My wife was getting antsy in the back room, asking me who it was from. I told her it was a spam email that tricked me for a second. She laughed a little and looked relieved as she put the little girl's cake in the oven. I told my wife I needed to go home because I had some voice acting things to work on. I knew she would believe me and leave me alone about it because fighting me on it never worked. I actually sat in my car nearby and stared at my wife's GPS location. I never relied on this before and I could only hope she wouldn't turn it off. I held my breath when she started moving down the road. I started following her and seconds later, a text came through from my wife that said she'll be closing the store late because a huge order was placed. My heart broke at this very moment. Then I saw her GPS turn a different way and I knew we were over. She was sleeping with our married customer. I kept driving, just barely able to stay focused. I felt the blood moving through my body at an alarming speed. She hadn't turned off the locator, so she led me straight to AP's house. Just as she was getting out of the car and his front door was opening, I met them both at his front door and I can't even recall what I was saying, only that I was just yelling and staring at them. AP didn't know what to do besides yell sorry and try to shut the door as fast as possible. But I stopped him by punching him in the face. He fell to the floor just inside his house, unconscious. My wife was speechless and red in the face. I asked her to explain herself, but she couldn't speak due to shock and embarrassment. She freaked out that I punched him, but then all she could say was sorry. The affair fog cleared and she realized we were standing in front of AP's house. All because she started an affair with him. A married man and father who shouldn't have been anything more than our customer. I started yelling again because I thought of our wedding day and the day we started our business. I dashed back to the car before the tears came from realizing the life we had was changed forever. And she probably did this more than once. I thought about all the messages they sent and how she lied to me. Sadness turned into anger, so I drove home, leaving her standing in AP's driveway. I packed stuff and printed notices to put on the bakery windows. As she arrived home, I was driving down the street to return to AP's house. The front door was closed now with another car in the driveway. All looked peaceful, but that wouldn't last. In their mailbox, on their doors, and some of their bushes, and a few on the windows, I put copies of my notice. It named my wife and AP in a sexual scandal that deemed the bakery filthy. I quoted some of the filthy things they said to each other and one nude of each. Then I informed the health department. Hours later, the whole town was freaking out. People started talking really fast about the scandal. You don't realize what a small world it is until it comes crashing down. My wife closed the business before the divorce was final, and before the health department officially ordered her to close because her customer base was gone. She left the state alone with her SUV packed full, headed to someone she met online seeking a roommate. I got to keep our house since she couldn't afford it without the bakery, so I sold it, and just like that, everything we made together was dissolved. During all this, she did try reaching out to me, which is how I found out that AP was divorced, but they wouldn't continue to see each other. He had to move 120 miles in the opposite direction. She always said sorry and that she understood why I ended it. I asked her why this happened, and all she could say was that he greatly admired her cooking and flattered her by saying things like he wished she was his wife. I told her I wouldn't wish for her to be anyone's wife. I stopped answering her calls after that. I knew she was probably scared or going through a lot, and I didn't want my emotions getting involved in her karma. I am healing and doing well. With the profit I got from the house that I never wanted to see again, I got a really sweet new place to call my home. It includes a home office for my voice acting and impersonation career. OP, I am so glad you recovered from this ordeal the way you did. It was so lucky that you found AP's messages. As hard as it was to go through this, you had to discover the truth, and you got them to follow through with their sneaky behavior to catch them in the act. They were very bold, inconsiderate, and careless. AP even knew who you were and ignored the fact that he was stealing your wife's honor and love. The least he deserved was a punch in the face and to lose the family he betrayed. I understand why you freaked out. Your wife and AP didn't deserve to get away with living a double life while they had loving spouses at home. You are an example of what to do and how to handle infidelity. Thank you for sharing this story. I wish you the best of luck. Now let's get into our second story for today. My wife and I lived in California for the entirety of our relationship. We met when we were in college, both 19 years old. She was in theater and movie acting. She enjoyed acting in plays, but her dream was to be in the movies. She was lovely and already had some jobs as a model. I was smitten. I was majoring in behavioral psychology. We married after she graduated, and I continued my studies while she got roles in any play or movie she could find. She was always at rehearsal while I was at work, and occasionally when I was home. Sometimes I was invited to her rehearsals, But those invitations stopped when she got the lead female role in one romantic comedy play. She came home later and was gone way more during this play than all the other ones. By this time we were married for 3 years. I asked if I could go to one of these rehearsals, and she said these were private. I thought that was weird. She got free tickets for her family to come when it was finally time for the performance. We all attended on the same night. Her mother, father, sister, and me. She was a beautiful, convincing actress. The male lead in the play seemed to have great chemistry with her. But nothing convinced me so much as the passionate kiss at the end. I'd seen her kiss in other plays, but this one seemed different. I was convinced my worries were valid when she looked at him instead of me after the show was over. Her own father made a comment that fed into my worry. He said she could rip out any man's heart because it looked like she was in love with that man. We got to meet the cast, but my wife introduced us oddly to her male co-star. She introduced her mom and dad as her mom and dad, but then she only introduced her sister and I by our first names. Like we could have been friends of hers or a couple. I told her my worries later that night after our celebratory dinner. She admitted she felt bonded to him, and they had a great time together during all the preparation for the play. I asked her to stop talking to him completely after closing night. She looked devastated and said if I'd reconsider, she planned to work with him again. It was because of the onstage chemistry I was so uncomfortable with that she saw her career's potential to blossom with him as her co-star. I took this opportunity to ask her a few questions since she wanted me to reconsider. I asked if they ever hung out alone without my knowledge. She looked a little embarrassed but said yes. I asked why, and she said it was to rehearse their lines and eat dinner. I asked if it was like a date, and she said she didn't see it that way but she wasn't sure what he thought. I asked if he knew I was her husband, and she said she introduced me. I pointed out she only said my name, and she looked confused like she didn't remember doing that. Following the awkward silence, I told her I didn't want her to contact him or work with him again. She looked really upset and kind of angry. She said she didn't deserve to be controlled. I told her this wasn't something she could fight me on. It was a matter of keeping our marriage true and honest, without anything that would make one of us uncomfortable. Well, she did eventually tell me she'd stop talking to him, but 1 month and many long absences later, I knew she could still be meeting up with him and doing things without my knowledge. One day, 5 or so months later, my wife and I were actually spending time together outside when she took an Instagram selfie without me. It showed the back of our house and location, which is part of the reason why AP jumped our fence. The other reason is that my wife had apparently stopped talking to him for a few days and now he knew why. It was because he saw me and realized she was married. Of course I recognized him from the play. My wife was freaking out and trying to say she hadn't seen him since the play. He didn't want to say anything when he realized she was betraying him, but I told him if he didn't want me to call the cops for his trespassing, he needed to be honest and tell me if they were having an affair. He said they were, but he hadn't heard from her, and now that he knew she was married, he wouldn't see her again. After he left, my wife told me not to believe him. She said he'd been trying to see her again ever since the play, but she refused without telling him why, so he lost it. Well, I'd have to be a fool if I didn't at least investigate what AP said. So I checked my wife's phone and to her dismay, found her WhatsApp and made her log in under threat of divorce. There were all the messages with AP. She only stopped talking to him for 3 days, but there was evidence she had sex with him at his house several times after they went out together on dates. They were a full-blown couple since the play. I showed her family via screenshots sent from her phone before I smashed it. Then I kicked her out, and she begged me to give her a second chance. She said she realized now that it was just an infatuation, and beyond their acting skills, they had nothing in common, and she didn't want to sleep with him or anyone else besides me ever again. I told her she might as well join the Coven of Nuns because she would never have me again. I trusted her, supported her, and wanted to build a great life with her. After I kicked her out, she tried countless times to break in, so I got restraining order until our divorce was final. Then the house was officially mine. OP, I am sorry your wife fell for a man that was never meant to be hers. I'm sorry she lied to you about it and kept her marriage to you a secret from him. She doesn't deserve to be given a second chance after something like this. She would never respect you in the same way, knowing she could get away with cheating whenever she felt like it, and always count on you to keep a roof over her head. I am proud of you for all the actions you took, and that you didn't give in to her begging. It takes a strong person to be able to handle this the way you did. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. My wife was a literate woman, so she really enjoyed writing letters to a couple of pen pals. It was always her thing, and I never questioned her about it. She'd tell me a few things about what her friends were up to, but it was never anything that weird. She was always the one to get the mail to. It came while I was at work, and she never failed to bring it in. I never saw the mail she received. I just assumed she would tell me if anything exciting was happening. My wife got a gym membership. I couldn't believe it, but within 5 months she lost 50 pounds. That is an extreme weight loss and she earned it. I was really enjoying her new confidence in the bedroom, but our bedroom activities gradually became less frequent. I was pretty bummed that it always seemed like she was focused on something deep and thought about daily problems or at the gym. I eventually persuaded her, but it seemed like something was on her mind. I asked her what was up, and she said one of her pen pals was moving to town soon, and she was nervous to meet her in person. I told her she shouldn't worry about it or feel like she has to go. I offered to go with her, and she insisted that wasn't necessary, because she was too nervous to change the dynamic of their relationship, and was going to keep their relationship to strictly pen pals. As soon as she said this, I suddenly had a flashback of what she told me, before we got married, about an ex-boyfriend she had that was serving time in prison. They were together for several years and his release date wasn't until that very same year. I swear I nearly had a heart attack. I grabbed my chest and went into the bathroom. My wife was asking me what was wrong, what was going through my head, and I asked her shakily if she was talking about her ex being released from prison. She hesitated to answer but said yes like a deflating balloon. She looked super nervous and sweaty. I asked her what else she was hiding from me. She pretended to be innocent and clueless, but I told her I knew her for 8 years, and she wasn't going to get any lies past me. She said that he already got out, and she already saw him several times. Even worse, she could be pregnant, and wasn't sure who the father was. I steadied myself from falling over, and yelled breathlessly for her to get out. I couldn't even look at her. I couldn't believe she was despicable enough to do this disgusting thing she just admitted to. She pleaded with me not to leave her because she wasn't sure who the father was, and if it was my baby, we should keep our family together. I told her she was nuts for thinking that sleeping with her ex-felon boyfriend was forgivable. We had no idea who the father was and that was horrible. I eventually got her outside along with some clothes and crap she owned. She was sitting out there for a while, but when I checked the 5th time she was gone. I didn't know what she was going to do, but I honestly hoped she wouldn't go to the felon. Over the next 3 months she tried calling me, leaving me emotional voicemails, and texting to ask for money. She was staying with the felon. She wouldn't admit it was his baby until I told her I wouldn't give her money either way. Then she told me it was his. She said he drank a lot, and she felt like it was only a matter of time until he went back to prison. Well, before he got in trouble with the law again, he got in trouble with her. He slept with several other women, and didn't try to be discreet about it at all. He didn't respect her at all, and it was painfully clear he didn't consider her to be anything close to a wife. She started calling me sorrowfully every week. She said she had no idea her life was going to end up like this. She admitted that she blamed herself and her stupid mistake. I told her that admitting she made a mistake or several was the first step to making smarter decisions. She asked me what was going to happen to her, and I wish I could have prepared her for what was to come. She was dumped and kicked out by her felon lover. For months pregnant. Shortly after that, he was taken back to prison while hosting a party with illegal things. She told me on a voicemail that she was taken into a women's shelter, but it was first come first serve each night, so sometimes she failed to get there early enough and had to sleep on a park bench. If she couldn't find a new place to live, she was at risk of having her baby taken by Child Protective Services. I was nervous for her but didn't involve myself too much with it. I knew she was no longer my responsibility, and things have a way of sorting themselves out somehow. I wish she would have been honest and appreciated the new life she created with me. Instead, it's like she wanted to have a relationship with both of us. She made several poor decisions by going behind my back and lying so many times she lost the great life we had together. Wow, OP, I am so sorry your wife betrayed you and kept in contact with her ex without telling you. Not only that, but she had so many chances to come clean or stop communicating with him. She should have gone to the gym to improve her health and spice up her marriage with you. It's a shame she didn't realize how good she had it before giving it all up. I'm not sure what he was sent to prison for, but usually it's a good idea to consider that fact before jumping into a serious relationship. Thankfully, there are a lot of ways to keep tabs on where a significant other is. It's a shame it's even necessary. A person who's ready to commit to a long-term relationship should have to prove it by dating for a long time while remaining independent. I know life throws all kinds of different situations out there, but that's why it's wise to be slow to move in with someone or get married. Thank you for sharing your story with us. I wish you all the best going forward. Now let's get into our second story for today. My wife and her friends took 6 months to plan a vacation to the Netherlands without me. I worked a lot, but I encouraged her to go with her friends. None of them had significant others, and this was her thing from the beginning. I wasn't going to tell her no because it was her decision even though I was her partner. I never thought she put herself in a situation to cheat on me, but I was wrong. She just happened to be communicating with a man from the Netherlands for longer than it took to plan the trip. When I was expecting her home, she called me and told me that as hard as it was for her to do it, she was leaving me. Well, technically she had already left me. She was going to stay in the Netherlands. I was shocked. Before I could ask many questions, she told me she met someone there and instantly fell in love. She no longer cared for the life she built with me. I couldn't believe what she was saying. She was my wife and we just talked about conceiving a child, but she took advantage of my money to leave me for someone else. After pressuring her for answers and accusing her of leaving her husband for a stranger, she admitted that she'd been talking with him for almost a year before planning the trip. Our divorce was pretty straightforward. She left me and suddenly moved to a different country, so I got to keep the house and didn't owe her alimony. She called me a month later, sobbing and remorseful. She said AP kicked her out, she had nowhere to go, and no way to get a loan. She begged me to help her get back to the country, and assured me I'd never hear from her again unless it was to pay me back for the cost of the ticket. I pretended to think about it so she could go on about how stupid she was. It was music to my ears. Then I told her no, I would never help her or speak to her again because she was a horrible person. She wailed in misery as I hung up and blocked her number. Her family called me confused 1 week later. They told me they finally got a call from her, and she said some crazy stuff they wanted to confirm with me. After confirming that we did divorce, they asked me if she was actually stranded there. I told them I wasn't sure because she was none of my concern anymore since she left the country to be with AP. They were stunned and silent, and could only ask me if I was sure. I said yes, and they apologized to me, saying they couldn't believe their own daughter was capable of this despicable behavior. They also explained that she told them she was stranded with nowhere to live because I left her there while we were on vacation, which led her into the arms of the man she was staying with, who recently kicked her out. I told them that wasn't true, but it was fine if they didn't believe me because our divorce was final. They were more willing to believe me than her. They said she asked them for a plane ticket home because she didn't have a dime to her name and no connections or approvals for a loan. I was just as disappointed in her as they were. For her poor decisions and complete disrespect for her family. She didn't even care to update them about her life, or ask for advice before getting into this situation. They told me they were going to help her, but it would be the last time they ever spoke to her because they were so betrayed and hurt. They planned to disown her like she was so willing to do to them and me. I was glad to hear it but tried to sound indifferent. It wasn't until another year passed that I actually heard from my ex-wife. She was back in the country, but completely alone. It was February when she left me a voicemail saying she needed me back. She was crying and didn't know where she was going. Call me what you will, I never called her back. We might as well be strangers in life now. I've been healing and building my own fortune. I guess my life would best be compared to Principal Lewis from American Dad. I have hope for the future instead of bitterness for women. I know my experience was crazy, but if I take the time I need to find a good woman worth keeping, it's unlikely to happen again. I mostly live gratefully without expecting anything while accepting good things with humility. OP, I am so sorry your wife abandoned you to move in with AP. I know she conspired to leave you for him if they hit it off on the vacation. You can't just leave the life you knew while keeping it secret from everyone, and then expect family to be there when you need them. Life decisions bring consequences, So make sure your decisions are as considerate of others as possible. She didn't think anything through and was a fool to think this could turn out well. Chances are it's never a good idea to give up your family for something that might not work out. Having a secret romantic interest while in a marriage is nothing but trouble, and a respectable spouse would never put themselves in that situation. If you're comfortable in your marital home, appreciate who you have and avoid stabbing them in the back. I wish you nothing but the best going forward. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened.